I was 23 the first time I stepped into the glass tower that would change my life, and I remember thinking that the building looked like it was made to keep people like me out. Everything in front of me was clean, shining, and expensive. Everything behind me was noise, heat, and struggle. I stood there on the sidewalk for a moment, my cheap dress shoes pinching my feet, my shirt a little too big because it wasn't really mine, and I wondered if this was a mistake. But the landlord didn't care about my doubts. The bills on the table in my small rented room didn't care either. So I took a breath, wiped my sweaty palms on my pants, and walked through the revolving doors of Stonebridge Corporation. Inside, the air was cold, conditioned, and full of a quiet urgency. People in suits moved with purpose, their footsteps echoing on the polished floor. I kept my head down as I approached the reception desk, clutching the file that held my resume, my last pay stub from a warehouse job, and a photocopy of my ID. The receptionist looked me over quickly, her expression polite but distant, like someone checking a package rather than a person. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here for the assistant position," I said. "Administrative assistant. My name is Isaiah." She typed something, glanced at the screen, and then at me again. "You're a bit early." I smiled nervously. I couldn't afford to be late. She didn't laugh. She pointed me toward a waiting area with white chairs and glass tables that held magazines I'd never pay for. I sat there, feeling the weight of my whole life pressing down on my shoulders. My mother's face floated through my mind, the way it looked the last time I saw her healthy, before the sickness took away her strength and her laughter. Before she died, she told me there was something I needed to know. She was lying on the old mattress, sweat on her forehead, her voice weak but stubborn. "Isaiah," she whispered, "you were never a mistake. You hear me? Never." I held her hand and nodded, even though a part of me never believed it. Then she said, almost as if she was speaking to herself, "He threw us away like we were nothing. But you, my son, you are everything." I asked her who she meant, but she closed her eyes, and the moment slipped through my fingers. She died with that secret locked inside. The door to the interview room opened, and a man in a gray suit called my name. I stood up too fast, almost knocking my knee on the glass table. I apologized under my breath and followed him, my heart beating too loudly. The interview was a blur of questions about organization, discipline, basic computer skills. I didn't have fancy words or impressive degrees. I had long nights in warehouses, odd jobs, and a stubborn refusal to give up. So I told the truth. I told them I needed a chance. Told them I was willing to work harder than anyone else they had ever hired because I had nothing to fall back on. They didn't hire me that day. They called me 3 weeks later at night, when I had almost given up hope. The voice on the phone said, "Isaiah, this is HR from Stonebridge Corporation. We reviewed your application again. The CEO's office needs a junior administrative assistant. The pay is above entry level. You start Monday if you accept." I almost dropped the phone. My first real chance, my first step out of survival and into something that looked like a future. I didn't know then that I had just agreed to work for the man whose shadow had hovered over my life long before I knew his name. My first morning as an employee, I arrived an hour early. The security guard checked my badge, nodded with the tired politeness of someone who saw hundreds of faces every day, and waved me through. The HR woman, a calm lady named Miss Lewis, walked me up to the top floor. "You'll be supporting the CEO's office," she said. "Mostly documents, scheduling, basic tasks. It's demanding, but if you do well, there's room to grow." "The CEO," I repeated, my throat suddenly dry. "I work for him?" "Indirectly," she said. "Directly for his office manager, but you'll see him." She gave me a sideways look. "Don't take it personally if he's intense. He's under a lot of pressure." I didn't say out loud that people like me had been under pressure since the day we were born. We reached a large glass door with a silver nameplate, Alexander Stonebridge. Even the letters on the door looked expensive. Through the glass, I could see a vast office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city like it belonged to him. Ms. Lewis introduced me to Mrs. Harlow, a woman in her late 50s with kind eyes and a firm voice. She showed me where I'd sit at a smaller desk just outside the main office, and she started explaining my duties in detail. I was still trying to memorize everything when the atmosphere in the room shifted. It was subtle at first, like the way animals sense a storm before it arrives. Conversations slowed, people straightened their posture, the elevator dinged, and a man stepped out. I didn't need anyone to tell me who he was. Alexander Stonebridge walked with the quiet authority of someone who didn't have to announce himself. Tall, impeccably dressed, dark suit tailored to his frame, a watch on his wrist that probably cost more than every room I'd ever rented combined. His hair was streaked with silver at the temples, and his eyes, those eyes, were sharp and pale, scanning the corridor with bored focus. People greeted him like they always did, with respect and a hint of fear. When his gaze passed over me, something inside me jolted, like my body recognized something my mind didn't yet understand. For a moment, his eyes lingered on my face, just a second too long. Then he looked away and kept walking. "Good morning, Mr. Stonebridge," said Mrs. Harlow. He gave a brief nod. "Morning. Is that the new assistant?" "Yes," she said. "This is Isaiah." He turned to me fully then, those light eyes assessing me like I was a document he had to sign or reject. "Isaiah," he repeated. "You're early." I tried to smile. "Yes, sir. I didn't want to be late." "Being early doesn't impress me," he said. "Only results do." His voice was controlled but cold. "I expect precision, no mistakes, and no excuses. If you can't deliver, HR will find someone who can. Understood?" I swallowed the sting of humiliation and nodded. "Understood, sir." He didn't bother to say welcome. He walked past me into his office, and the door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded, to me, like a verdict. It didn't take long to realize that working near him meant living under constant scrutiny. Every email had to be perfect. Every report checked and rechecked. Every phone call handled smoothly. If I hesitated, if I asked for clarification, he'd look at me with growing impatience. "Use your brain, Isaiah," he'd say. "I don't pay people to be confused." He wasn't just demanding, he was cutting. One day when I misfiled a single document in a stack of 30, he called me into his office and tossed the whole pile on the desk. "Tell me," he said, leaning back in his chair, "do you enjoy wasting my time?" "No, sir," I said quietly. "Then why do you expect me to tolerate this level of incompetence?" It was one document, one mistake. But under his gaze, it felt like the proof that I didn't belong there at all. I apologized, fixed it, and promised it wouldn't happen again, even though the humiliation burned in my chest long after I left his office. And yet, there were moments, brief, confusing moments, when something in his expression softened. One afternoon, as I handed him his updated schedule, our fingers brushed. He looked at me, really looked at me, and a flicker of something passed across his face. Curiosity, recognition, pain? I couldn't tell. It vanished almost instantly, replaced by the usual cold professionalism. "Anything else?" he asked. "No, sir," I said, stepping back, wondering why my heart was beating so fast. I told myself it was just fear and stress. I didn't know there was another reason. At home, my world was different. My rented room was small, with peeling paint and thin walls that let in every sound from the street. But it was mine, or at least rented in my name. On nights when it rained, I'd lie on the bed, listening to the drops hit the metal roof, thinking of my mother, thinking of the things she never said. After she died, I kept her few belongings in a worn cardboard box. I hadn't opened it in months. Maybe I was afraid of what I'd feel. Maybe I was afraid of what I'd find. One night, after another long day of criticism and tension at the office, I came home exhausted, my voice still echoing with his words. "Do you enjoy wasting my time?" And I finally pulled the box out from under the bed. Inside were small fragments of her life, a scarf she loved, a broken necklace, letters I'd written as a child, a few photos. At the bottom, folded into a small envelope, there was a photograph I'd never seen before. In it, A younger version of my mother stood next to a man I didn't recognize. She looked radiant, happy in a way I'd only seen in pieces. The man beside her was tall, with the same confident posture I had seen earlier that day in a glass tower. He was smiling at the camera, his arm around her shoulders. His face was slightly younger, but there was no mistaking him. Alexander Stonebridge. My hands started to shake. I turned the photo over and saw faint handwriting on the back. To Clara, with all my love. A.S. It felt like the room tilted. I sat there on the floor, the photo still in my hand, my mind racing between the past and the present. My mother's last words echoed in my head. He threw us away like we were nothing. And now the image in my hand gave that he a face, a name, a fortune. I had been working for my father without knowing it. If you're still here, listening to my story, maybe you know something about secrets that change everything. Maybe you've been hurt by someone who was supposed to protect you. If that's you, I want you to know you're not alone. And if you want to walk with me through the rest of this, you can stay, you can subscribe, and you can share your own experience in the comments. Sometimes telling the truth is the first step toward healing. The next morning, I barely slept. My eyes burned, my chest felt tight, and my hands trembled every time I thought of facing him. I almost called in sick, but rent doesn't wait, and truth doesn't disappear just because you close your eyes. So, I put the photo carefully in my bag and went to work. The whole day, I felt like I was carrying a bomb. Every time I saw him walk past my desk, every time I heard his voice, my heart pounded so loudly I was sure someone would notice. I watched him bark orders, sign deals, move the world with a signature, and I kept thinking, you don't know who I am. You don't know what you did. In the afternoon, as I was organizing a set of documents for a board meeting, Mrs. Harlow walked over and placed a hand gently on my shoulder. You're pale, she said quietly. Are you all right? I'm fine, I lied. Just tired. She looked at me with eyes that had seen a lot of things in that office. You're doing well, Isaiah, she said. He's hard on you, but you're still here. That says something. I hesitated before asking. Has he always been like this? She exhaled slowly, glancing toward the closed door of his office. Not always. There was a time when he laughed more, when he talked about love like it was something he could keep. She paused, her gaze distant. Then, something happened. A mistake he never forgave himself for. He hasn't been the same since. My throat tightened. A mistake? Someone he lost, she said, then stopped herself. I've already said too much. But it was enough to confirm what the photograph had started. That evening, I waited until the building was almost empty. The meeting had ended, the board members had left, and the office was quiet, the city lights glowing through the glass. I heard his voice call my name. Isaiah, in my office. I walked in, my bag heavy on my shoulder, the photograph burning like fire inside. He was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, staring at the skyline. Without turning around, he said, "The minutes from the meeting, where are they?" "I'll have them ready in the morning," I said. "I just need to review one section." He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "You're pushing your luck." "I don't want to make mistakes," I replied, my own voice surprisingly steady. "I know how much you hate them." He regarded me for a moment, then moved to his desk, sitting down. "Anything else?" That was my moment. "Yes," I said, his eyebrows lifted slightly. "What?" "I need to ask you a personal question." His expression hardened. "This is not the place for personal questions. It's about the past," I insisted. "Your past." He leaned back, the lines around his mouth tightening. "You're out of line, Isaiah." "Maybe," I said, "but I think I deserve to know." The silence between us thickened. For a second, I thought he would fire me on the spot. His fingers drummed lightly on the desk. "What exactly do you think you deserve to know?" My hand moved toward my bag, but fear stopped me. I wasn't ready yet to throw the photo on the desk like an accusation. Did you ever walk away from someone who needed you? His jaw tensed, his eyes narrowed. You don't know what you're talking about, he said quietly. Maybe I know more than you think, I replied. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. We're done here. Get out of my office. I left, my heart pounding, my face hot with frustration and hurt. But I had seen something in his eyes in that moment, a crack in the armor, a shadow of guilt, shadow. Over the next days, the tension grew like a rope pulled too tight. He was harsher, more impatient. I made fewer mistakes, but he seemed determined to find fault in everything I did. I told myself it didn't matter, that I had something bigger now, the truth. I just needed to decide what to do with it. One morning when I arrived, the office atmosphere was different. Quieter, heavier. People whispered in corners, checking their phones, their faces pale and worried. I went to my desk, confused, until Mrs. Harlow walked over, a tablet in her hand. Isaiah, she said softly. Something came out in the news. My stomach lurched. What news? She turned the screen toward me. There, in bold letters, was a headline about Alexander Stonebridge and a secret child he had abandoned years ago. There was no name, no photo of me, but there was my mother's, Clara. They had dug up the past he had tried to bury, and now the world wanted blood. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. How did they find out? No idea, she said, but they're outside. Journalists, cameras, it's going to get ugly. Before I could react, his door opened. Alexander stood there, holding a printed copy of the article in his hand. His face was tight, his eyes stormy. Isaiah, he said, his voice lower than usual. My office now. I followed him in, and he closed the door. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just stared at the article, then at me. There was no point pretending anymore. The truth was already leaking into the world. Clara, he said finally. That name means something to you, doesn't it? I nodded, my throat dry. She was my mother. His shoulders sagged. He sat down heavily, as if his legs could no longer carry his weight. I knew it, he whispered. I reached into my bag and took out the photograph. My hand shook as I placed it on the desk between us. He picked it up with trembling fingers, his eyes scanning the image like a man seeing a ghost. His mouth parted slightly. I gave her this, he said. I remember that day. You gave her this, I said quietly, and then you gave her nothing else. He flinched, as if my words were a physical blow. I didn't know, he said. Isaiah, I swear to you, I didn't know about you. By the time I found out she was pregnant, she was gone. Her family moved, her number changed, she disappeared. You tried with what? I cut in. A phone call? A private investigator? How long did you keep trying before you decided it was easier to move on and build an empire? His eyes filled with tears he didn't try to hide this time. I was a coward, he said. I was afraid of scandal, of losing deals, of losing the life I thought I needed. I told myself that if she wanted me to be involved, she would come back. I told myself lies until they felt like truth. And somewhere out there you were growing up without a father because I chose my reputation over you? Anger surged through me. Do you know what it's like to go to sleep hungry? I asked, my voice shaking. Do you know what it's like to wonder why no one ever came for you? To watch your mother work herself to death because there was no one else? Do you know what it's like to look in the mirror and wonder if there's a piece of you missing, and the only person who can answer is a stranger living in a glass tower? His tears fell silently. For a moment, I hated him more for that, for crying now after all these years, instead of then. I deserve your anger, he said. I deserve your hatred. I won't ask you to forgive me. But I will tell you this. I never stopped thinking about Clara. I never stopped wondering if she had a child. I never stopped seeing the face of a baby I never met when I closed my eyes at night. But I never did enough. I know that. And now the world knows too. There was a knock at the door. We both turned as Mrs. Harlow stepped in, her expression strained. They're here for a statement, she said. The board is panicking. The press is outside. They want to know if it's true. Alexander looked at me, then at the photo, then at the door. Tell them I'll speak, he said, his voice regaining some of its steel. Give me 5 minutes. When she left, he turned back to me. I can deny this, he said. I can call it a smear campaign. I can say it's fake. People will believe me. They always do when the money is big enough. But I'm tired of lying, and I'm tired of living with what I did to you. If you'll allow it, I want to face this, with you beside me. I stared at him, conflicted. Part of me wanted to walk away, let him deal with the mess he had created. Another part of me remembered my mother's tired eyes and the way she clung to the idea that I was not a mistake. Maybe this was my chance to prove she was right. If I stand next to you, I said slowly, it won't be for you. It will be for her. And for me. For the child you left behind. He nodded. That's more than I deserve. We walked out of the office together side by side. As we approached the elevator, I could feel eyes on us from every direction. Some were curious, some shocked, some already judging. We descended to the lobby in silence, the numbers on the elevator panel ticking down like a countdown to a different life. When the doors opened, the noise hit us. Voices, cameras, shouted questions, security trying to hold the line. The world had come to see a powerful man fall, or at least stumble. I felt like I was walking into a storm with no umbrella. He stepped forward, but I stayed close to his side. Someone shouted, Mr. Stonebridge, is it true? Did you abandon a child? Another voice yelled, Who is the young man with you? The flashes were blinding. Alexander raised his hand for quiet. It took a moment, but eventually the crowd calmed enough to hear him. His voice was steady, but I could feel the tension in his body. There is a story out today, he began, about a woman named Clara and a child she had years ago. I'm here to tell you that the story is true. Clara was a woman I loved and failed. And this young man beside me is Isaiah. A murmur swept through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in on my face. I wanted to disappear, but I stayed still. I made choices I regret, he continued. I chose my image over my responsibility. I allowed fear and pride to control my decisions. And a child grew up without a father because of me. That is not something I can erase by writing a check or issuing a statement. I can't undo the past, but I can stop running from it. A reporter raised her voice. Are you acknowledging him as your son? He glanced at me, then back at them. Yes, he said, Isaiah is my son. Whether he accepts me as his father or not is his decision. But I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that place if he ever gives it to me. Another question flew out. Will this affect your position as CEO? He took a breath. I am stepping back from my role temporarily to handle this personally. My company can survive without me for a while. My son already survived without me for years. It's time my priorities reflected what actually matters. The crowd erupted with more questions, more noise, more chaos. Security stepped in, creating a path for us to leave. We walked out through the side entrance into a quieter courtyard. There, away from the cameras, we could breathe again. I sat on a bench, my legs suddenly weak. He sat beside me, but not too close. We were connected by blood and history, but there was still a distance between us. I know this doesn't fix anything, he said softly. No, I replied. It doesn't, but it's a start, he said. I didn't answer. I watched the trees sway gently in the breeze, the leaves whispering secrets to each other. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future that didn't revolve around anger and questions. A future where I had the power to decide who I wanted to be, not just what had been done to me. If you're still listening to my story, I said quietly, more to the invisible listener than to him, maybe it's because you've carried your own pain for a long time. Maybe someone walked away from you. Maybe they never came back. If this is reaching you, share it with someone who needs to hear they're not alone. And tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. I really want to know. Weeks passed. The storm in the media calmed slowly, replaced by new scandals and stories. People moved on, but we couldn't. Not really. Alexander kept his word and stepped back from his role officially. The board complained, shareholders worried, but he held firm. Every morning, he still came to the building, but not to the top floor. Instead, he would sit with me in a small conference room and we would talk. He told me about his childhood, about the pressure he grew up under, the expectations, the fear of falling from a height that his family never wanted him to question. He told me about meeting my mother, about how she was light and warmth in a world of cold deals and endless numbers. He told me how he panicked when the idea of a child and a scandal collided with his fragile ambition. I told him about my childhood too, about moving from place to place, about watching my mother struggle, her body breaking slowly under the weight of work and worry, about the men who tried to take advantage of her vulnerability, about the first time I got into a fight defending her and how proud and scared she looked afterward. about the nights I lay awake wondering if I was invisible. He listened, really listened. And sometimes, when he spoke, his voice broke in ways that made me see him not as a billionaire, not as my cruel boss, but as a human being who had done terrible things and was finally facing them. Forgiveness is not a switch you flip. It's not a word you say once and everything becomes clean and easy. Forgiveness is a road. Some days you walk forward, some days you stand still, some days you walk backward, angry all over again. But as we sat together in that room, sharing pieces of our broken stories, I realized something. I didn't want to be defined by what he did anymore. I didn't want my entire life to be a reaction to his absence. I wanted to choose who I would be, and that choice required me to let go of some of the rage that had protected me for so long. One evening, we visited my mother's grave together. He carried flowers, expensive ones, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the way his hands shook as he placed them gently on the ground. He stood there in silence for a long time, his head bowed. "I'm sorry, Clara," he whispered. "I'm sorry I wasn't the man you needed me to be. I'm sorry I wasn't there for him. I'm sorry it took me so long to face the truth." I watched him, my heart torn between resentment and something else, something that felt dangerously like compassion. "I don't know if she can hear you," I said softly, "but I can." He turned to me, eyes wet. "And what do you hear?" "I hear a man who finally understands what he did," I replied. "That's a start. But if you want to honor her, then don't just cry and apologize at her grave. Be better in the days that follow. For her, for me, for yourself." He nodded slowly. "I will try, Isaiah, every day." We walked away from the graveyard in silence, the sky turning orange and purple above us. The pain didn't vanish, but it felt shared, and that made it lighter. In time, I had decisions to make. I could have demanded money, a share of his wealth, a piece of the empire I was never meant to be part of. People told me I should. Some said I'd be stupid not to. But I knew that if I built my future only on compensation for the past, I might never learn to stand on my own feet. So instead, I asked for something different. I asked him to fund scholarships in my mother's name for young people like me, from backgrounds like mine, who had to fight every day just to be seen. I asked him to make space for voices that had never been allowed into the rooms where decisions were made. He agreed, not as a favor, but as a responsibility. As for me, I stayed at the company for a while, but not as his assistant. I moved into a role where I could learn, grow, and eventually lead. Not because I was his son, but because I had earned that place. Still, whenever I needed to, I reminded him that our relationship would always be complicated, that my trust was something he had to keep earning, and he accepted that. He never asked me to pretend everything was okay, but he showed up, again and again. Some days he failed, some days he got it right. That's what trying looks like. Today, when I look in the mirror, I don't just see the face of the young man who once worked for a boss who humiliated him. I see someone who walked into the heart of his own pain and didn't let it swallow him. I see someone who turned betrayal into clarity, anger into strength, and absence into a different kind of presence. My billionaire boss didn't know I was his abandoned son. I didn't know he was the man who had haunted my mother's memories. We were strangers with the same blood. Now, we are something that doesn't fit neatly in any category. Not enemies, not yet what most people would call family, but something in between, moving forward, step by step. If there is a lesson in all of this, it's not that everyone deserves a second chance no matter what they've done. Some things are unforgivable. Some doors must stay closed for our own safety. The lesson for me is this: I have the power to decide what defines me. Not his abandonment, not his wealth, not the headlines. I define who I am. And sometimes the greatest act of justice is not to destroy the person who hurt you, but to refuse to let their actions decide your future. Sometimes the deepest form of revenge is building a life so whole, so grounded in truth, that their failure no longer has the final word. In the end, I chose not just to survive the story I was given, but to rewrite it. And if you're listening to this, maybe you can too.